Hello, everyone. Sir Roland here again with Chivalry podcast. Tonight's guest is Earl Mordygan MacGregor, a good friend of mine, and we're going to be discussing a couple of different things, but we're going to basically be centering our conversation around the virtue of truth. It should be a good conversation. I hope you are ready for some really interesting insights. With that, I'd like to say welcome, Earl Mordygan.
Hello. Thanks for having me. So my name is Mordygan MacGregor. I've been in the SCA for quite a while. My dad started playing when I was 2 in 1981. So I've been around for a while. Yeah, I am a knight in the SCA and a count. I reigned with Duchess Madigan in 2007 in the Kingdom of the Outlands.
Very cool. All right. So that's a little background information. Thank you for that. So we'll jump right in. We've got a couple questions to kind of get us warmed up. First one is, who was an early influence on your path to chivalry, and what notable wisdom or knowledge did they pass on to you?
First and foremost, I do have to mention my dad. He is also in the SCA, as I mentioned earlier. He was knighted in 1991, so he was an early example, in addition to just being my father, and I think raising me quite well. He was, an example to a lot of people, but myself included. Some of the early people, the first knighting I remember vividly was Sir Dennis the Right. I couldn't tell you the year. I don't remember. But I do remember it was at Ned Hook Park in Clovis. And it was Arton and Tara were king and queen at the time.
Oh, okay.
And Dennis is and always has been a shining example, I think, of a virtuous individual. Definitely somebody to emulate. He has a lot of personal strength, I would say. So he was definitely one of the early ones. But also seeing people and being around people like Arton and Tara, who had, to my very young eyes, were the epitome of regal bearing. So those people were around in the early, and then as I started getting into to becoming a teenager, I was squired first to Sir Christoph Gately, and he was an example for me to follow, and a teacher. At the time when I was squired, standing behind him during the ceremony of him was Wraith, who later turns out to become Duke Hrothgar. So the Golden Duke. And the Golden Duke, I think, mainly from my perspective, because he is a golden example. He is quiet, or rather he is reserved, but when he speaks, his words have weight. And he is very thoughtful, and so was a shining example for me as well. And later I wound up becoming as a squire, when I moved to California for a little while, my very late 19, 20, turned 21 out there. When I came back at 22, I was talking with Christoph, and he was moving away. And so I asked if it was okay with him if I became Hrothgar squire. And also clearly I had to ask Hrothgar too.
Yeah.
So I became his squire. And then then is when I really actually, I would say, tried to figure out what it was to be a knight. Earlier in my teenage years, I was a teenager. I don't know how much I was really paying attention, or what my drives were at that time. So early 20s, I would say, is when the most influential people were, other than the osmosis of just being around so many good people. So a lot of the names that would come up then are Madigan, Hrothgar, Arton, Bela Koss, Seth Williamson, who was an Atenvelt transplant for a while, lived here for a while. While he moved here after I was knighted, he was still somebody that I hold as an example and had qualities that I wish to emulate. And yeah, so I would say that's a lot. Bohemian, Kragon, again, just a lot of the examples that a lot of people hold up were my examples and my teachers.
Very good. It's very interesting lineage, to be a second gen guy, to be first squire to one man, but then to be squire to another, but also in the same line. I think you definitely had a very wide and varied sort of experience as an SCA player, and I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you early, is because those perspectives are unique in what we do. There's not many people around that have had anything close to what I think you have. So
sure, yeah, there's a couple of us, but definitely the minority is in the SCA is a lot of the the second gen people or even third gen people now starting to crop up and be prominent people within their own community.
Yeah. So moving on to our first question about truth.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been thinking about how to ask this particular question. I think the best way to introduce it would just be to say, can you tell us about the tattoo?
Sure. So on my right leg, I have a tattoo that has my personal motto, my extended motto, and a personality warning, I guess you could say. So my personal motto is truth in word. The extended motto is truth in word and truth in action, or truth in deed. And then the personality warning is, I'm not mean, you're just a sissy. And that can lead into truthfulness and maybe, though, a lack of tact. But so that's where it is. So my personal motto is truth in word and truth in deed.
Absolutely. I love there's a simplicity to its statement, but it has some depth when you start to really think about all the things that it implies. It's I think it's sort of a personal oath to oneself. When somebody takes that, when somebody takes that as a personal motto, you're saying, no, I'm going to hold myself to this standard. And I'm not going to speak falsely, bear false witness. I am going to say what I'm going to do and do what I'm going to say. And I remember when you told me years ago what that tattoo meant, and it spoke the words in Old English, I believe.
Yes, yeah. And I can. It's tread innen weoch, tread innen jefeocht. Each bene luthelicht. Du bist Anna Allewed.
It even sounds very poetic. But I think that yes, there is a warning maybe as to a personality trait. Some might see it as a warning. Don't come to me with petty and unserious things. Perhaps but I also think that
it's maybe less that, if I might interrupt.
Oh, please go ahead.
It's maybe less that don't come to me with petty things. It's more of, I'm going to tell you the truth, and I'm probably not going to sugarcoat it. If you're coming to me with a problem, I will help you fix that problem to the best of my ability. But sometimes when you have a problem, that problem is you. And that may mean that I will help you realize that that problem is you. And I'm not going to necessarily be very nice about it.
Yes. And I think that it's very common in our mundane culture to let our offense that we take at what somebody says drown out the truth of what it is that is being said. I think sometimes people don't want to hear truth because it may not sit well with them upon first hearing it. I think that it I think that to someone who hears that part of your motto that's inscribed on your leg, uh, I think that that is an admonishment to consider all that is being said before reacting.
Yes.
Personally,
Yeah. And really, I think it comes down to, and this might lead into some of the other questions that you might have had in mind, that it more comes down to objectivism. Um, so when I try to approach a problem, I try to approach it objectively, remove personal feeling out of it, so that I can't mistake something that might not go well with me, but would be the right thing to do or the right answer for the problem. So that also, I think, is where, it can lead into that. It can be, I'm not being mean, I'm just telling you the truth.
yeah, and I like the consistency of it, at least in my opinion, in the way that you have consistently been that way with dealing with myself and with others that I've seen you deal. Um, I think that if you're going to hold yourself to that standard, it's important that others believe that it's being maintained, and I would say that you do that very well. You have advised me a lot, and have always given me the straight answer and never shied away from something that I didn't want to hear. So I think that speaking truth to power or speaking truth to somebody in authority is a great skill for a knight or a member of the chivalry to have. So I think that you're a good example of that.
Thank you.
All right, moving right along. And this kind of marries with what we were just speaking on, but let's expand it a little bit. What does truth have to do with your personal path to chivalry? Why is it? What is it? Is it something that was just kind of ingrained with your raising? Is why you came to this? Was there a reason why truth kind of stands out as something that is that important to you to make it part of your personal motto?
Actually, it's, I would say, uh, a reflection on my youth, my misspent youth, as it were. Um, when I was younger, I remember that I've told some lies in the past when I was a kid, and I remember how that made me feel. Telling a lie and getting away with it still made me feel sick. And telling a lie, not getting away with it, now nobody trusts me.
Right.
So, what does truth have to do with my uh, personal path to chivalry? Without honesty, there is no virtue. You can name all the other virtues on the list, save for maybe prowess, because that's an objective outside observance. But everything else can be uh, elevated falsely.
Ah,
So, I can say that I've done these things or that I've been this kind of generous, and I didn't. So therefore, what kind of a person am I? Um, so on my path to chivalry, I walk that path every day. I try to walk that path every day. And so I have to be honest. And everyone, I think, has to be honest, because if you can't be trusted, then what can you do? What can I recall, or what can I rely on with you if you can't be trusted? Um, so it's kind of a, that boy who cried wolf thing. And that's, regardless of the cost in the end, the boy lost it because he lied.
yeah,
So
for sure. So then, um, is there any such thing as subjective truth as it is applied to the order of chivalry? Is that something that we dabble in? I know it's kind of a modern sort of idea. Is that something that's starting to be seen in justifications for behavior?
well, okay. So firstly, I would like to say no, truth is not subjective. It is objective because there is only the truth. How it is interpreted, what it's used for, how much of it is used, that's all subjective, sure. But I don't think that it needs, or rather, it shouldn't be that way. I don't think. So you know me. Others may not know me very well. I am not super strict on life being black and white, but on this particular subject, there is no other way. Because once you start having subjective truth, then you start justifying lies, and it all leads back to, well, you can't be trusted. If you are telling me something and you are trying to pass it off as truth and it's not the truth, then I can't trust you, and you are of no use to yourself or to me, or to the situation, whatever it is that we're trying to deal with.
Indeed. Okay. That's very interesting. I like that response. I think that because of what you said earlier about truth kind of being connected to all the other virtuous behaviors and everything, I think that ultimately it's got to be unshakable. It's got to be a basis almost. And it's one of the reasons why I decided to talk about it first after the interview with Sir Thomas, is because you begin there and then you move forward. And once we can all deal on the level with one another, trust each other, and be able to speak plainly. But I also believe that it's part of our role as members of the chivalry to seek out the truth in all circumstances, and avoid those situations that you mentioned earlier, like not knowing the whole truth, or only knowing pieces that are convenient to certain parties. Like, I think that being a knight means that you eschew that. You try to find what's right as much as possible.
Yeah. I think that the position that we hold is a position of burden, but it is a position of personal burden, and that we have to take on all of the responsibilities and that come with the position, and that includes dealing with the truth, even if that truth is painful or hard to deal with. We have to do that.
So, let's look at hypocrisy for a second.
Okay.
Do you find in your experience that hypocrisy is an issue in among the members of the Order of the Chivalry?
Yes, but I don't know how to deal with it. And I struggle with how to deal with it, because there are times when I just want to stand up and shout and say, you're wrong. That is not the truth of it. And perhaps I should, and perhaps that's a failing on my part, on my courage, that I am not doing that. I don't think it's prevalent, but I do see it from time to time. And it's usually in the trying to pass off other virtues of an individual, or pass around virtues of an individual, or lack of virtues of an individual.
Right. A little padding of the resume, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I honestly, if I'm being very honest, that's probably where I see it the most as well. I think that where I see it the most, that where it bothers me the most, is when we have a peer, not just a member of the chivalry, but a peer in general, who feels that it's okay to circumvent procedures. And I don't, you know me, I don't want to be a hard ass about any particular thing. I want things to go smoothly and people have a good time. But the thing is that there are aspects of what we do as a nonprofit organization that require us. Oh, I think I lost video.
I'm looking for your phone.
I know. Oh, there he goes. Anyway, technical difficulties, folks. But as I was saying, I think the thing that frustrates me most is when we have somebody who should know why it's important to make sure that you sign in at gate, or why it's important to observe quiet hours if we're in a place where that's a problem. Like when you're having to put up with people circumventing those things that have the potential to get our group in a lot of hot water,
Yeah.
lose sites, lose the ability to do things that we weren't were able to do. You know, the worst case scenario being litigation, and and they they do it all in the name of, well, this isn't as much fun as if I just did it the way I want to. And it's like, well, I get what you're saying on some level, but you particularly with knights, you swore that you would uphold the kingdom and its laws, and this is part of that, and you should do those things and stop doing stuff like jump gate because you only want to go to circle.
Yeah. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Do you think we put enough emphasis on oath keeping and honesty as an order?
No, I don't think so. But like I said, I don't feel that oath breaking or dishonesty is rampant.
I would agree.
But in the instances where it has happened, we try to have an oath helper, and then it kind of just falls away. Like, oh, we made this big public thing about trying to fix this problem. Look, we tried to make this problem go away, and then sweep under the rug. Let's not pay attention to it anymore. No. Oh, look at this other thing over here. So again, not rampant, but it is a problem, I think, and I don't think that we put enough emphasis on oath keeping.
Yeah.
Or rather, we don't put enough emphasis on the consequences of oath breaking.
Right. Not to make this about me really, but I got a little bit of a personal aside to that. I released a squire, my first squire, in fact, from my service because he broke his oath, and I caught a lot of crap about that, about dismissing a squire because he wasn't really interested in doing the things that he said he was going to do, and there wasn't animosity there. I just called it for what I saw it and said, hey, if you don't want to do this anymore, that's okay. And a lot of people thought I was being harsh. And the thing is that he knelt before me, took my sword into his hands, and spoke words. And to me, that's binding. And when I falter on my oath, I make amends and try to stand up and try again. And I gave him that opportunity, and he decided that he didn't want to go any further. And I think a lot of people were surprised at my lack of emotion behind it, but it was very cut and dry for me. I think that it's okay for people to admit that they're not willing to fulfill certain obligations any longer. And it would be better if you be released from an oath than try to continue to uphold an oath and fail without any, I guess, resolve to make it better.
And I would say that would actually lead into, a mark on the win side for his honesty.
Yes, absolutely. And I praised him for that because that was exactly when he finally admitted. I was like, I think we're now all being honest with each other.
Yeah. And moreover, he's being honest with himself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's personal honesty is paramount to everything else. So, I think he did the right thing. I think you did the right thing too. I don't think in removing emotion from it, in a lot of these situations like that, I think is better than being emotional. You can now look at it objectively. You can remove yourself from the equation and just look at the problem and solve the issue as the problem is laid out. So,
yeah. avoiding emotion is, as we all well know, can be difficult. But I think you're right. I think when you can make it work that way, it's for the best.
Hmm.
Um, okay, so how do you think? What are some examples that you might throw out there as ways that we might be able to hold our brothers and sisters in the chivalry more accountable, and for those who are not members of the chivalry, just other people in the game more accountable?
Well, that's tough. I mean, I think there needs to be some sort of level of expectation of what happens when you break an oath or you are dishonest in a fashion like that. And I don't know. I don't have that answer. Uh, I think my current level of jadedness might be a little harsher than what it needs to be. But I don't know. So but I do think that there needs to be a level of, uh, that's where I'm trying to go with this, is the expectation of what happens when you break an oath is better laid out before oath breaking happens.
Sure.
Uh, if there's no consequence to being a liar, then why not? I mean, it's easy to do that. You get personal gain out of it without trying. So if there's no consequence to it, then it's not good. But if there's known consequence, it's easier for those. It's easier to keep the honest if they know what the consequences are of being dishonest.
Yeah. I I think some of our issues can also stem from a lack of trust and understanding, and I think that extends from a lack of relationship. We're a big kingdom geographically, and I think there's a certain size subgroup that travels quite a bit. I think you're part of that subgroup. I think that there's many of us that go up and down the King's Highway and make those introductions, have those conversations, and then I think there's a whole other subgroup that doesn't, or they did at one time and don't any longer. And I think that um, when we're disconnected, at least on kingdom level things, when somebody does something that's egregious that the kingdom knows about, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that sometimes our inability to um, be objective in the situation can be attributed to a distrust of others or a lack of understanding of others. So
Yeah.
I think that could be that could lead to some resolving of some of this, but it's certainly not the only thing that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Yeah. I'm kind of with you on not knowing fully what to do. I think one of the big things that I would like us to do, and I kind of alluded to it before, is follow our rule set.
Yeah, and that leads back to what I was saying. If you
Yeah,
know what the consequences are,
exactly.
then it's a little bit easier to make the right choice, I think.
I agree, and I think after comparing notes with some folks from some other places, I think that just to give a COD example, martial courts, we don't know what those are because we don't have them, and everybody assumes they're real bad things. But I've been to places where they made it part of the culture that a martial court's just a review of what's been going on in the martialate, and sometimes there's some bad things that are addressed, and then sometimes all it is to talk about, hey, did we like the scenario? Did we not? And I think that that's going to take some attitude adjusting, and I'm hoping that as the next year or so folds out, we might be able to do some training and talking about how to address those issues specifically. Um, but it's all clearly outlined in our governing documents, and I think that more often than not, if we would kind of resist the urge to resolve it quickly and quietly, we might find more justice in that.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree that there are some things that we can do better than we have been. And yeah, it, it does take a cultural shift, I think, to get back onto an even ground for everybody in our kingdom, and make it to where everybody can be more trusted outright.
Sure. Okay. Let's look. Next question. How do you handle a situation when you are forced to break your word?
I don't break my word. That's even if the consequences are negative for me, I have to keep my word. I have to be honest. Now, I think that maybe you might be able to come up with some examples that I might be able to better articulate myself, or maybe not. It could be, I mean, I guess maybe I'm trying to pass off something that is not, or I don't know. Maybe I'm not fully understanding your question.
So, I mean, to follow up and be a little bit more specific, what happens when life circumstances cause you to break a commitment?
Okay.
Something like that. I know by interacting with you and dealing with you that you're not gonna tell me something that's not factual that may cause me harm. Yes,
Right.
I think we agree that that's not acceptable. But those tricky situations in life, when particularly in the SCA, because it happens quite a bit, where you think you're good to go and then something happens at the last second and boom. How do we recover from those sorts of situations?
Well, I mean, being honest, let's say I said I was going to be at an event to help with a particular engagement there, and I wasn't able, something came up, anywhere from my car breaking down to job or whatever, and I'm no longer able to go. I will let the person know that I made that commitment to, that I'm not going to be able to make it, and that I will work with them to try to find somebody to replace me, to make sure that they're not put out, to the best of my ability to do so.
I think that may seem very obvious, maybe to the people that are going to listen to this, and it may seem very obvious to you as an answer. But I just want the reason why I asked the question was to emphasize that people make mistakes, and we have to normalize that mistakes happen and not beat people over the head, because that's why people avoid telling the truth when stuff like this happens. I've had it happen many times where I'm the event steward or I'm the officer that's relying on somebody to get something done, and they're not communicating their issues, and then we get to the 11th hour and there's nothing that can be done anymore, and bad things are the result. I think communication is key. I think you hit on it perfectly, and I wanted to get it kind of from somebody who I think understands the benefits of being honest, because your policy is so strict that even when you're faced with a situation where you might have to have an awkward conversation, it's still 100% better to come out and admit that your head's underwater.
Yeah, for sure. And I have run into that. So I've taken on a job that I didn't fully understand, and kind of got over my head from, not kind of, I totally did get over my head with my ability to plan and be proactive in that nature. And I tried my best to apologize for it and work with whoever might be able to replace me in that situation. And I think it came out okay. I hope that I had made amends for my failure in that. And I haven't heard anything otherwise. So,
which actually marries right very well into the next question, which is, can Oathbreakers, dishonest fighters, redeem themselves? Is there a path?
The short answer is yes. The long answer is, when you gave me these questions, I thought of a pretty good analogy here. When you lie, you are building a brick wall between yourself and the subject that you are dealing with. And you can't see through that wall, and it's very easy to build that wall without any tools because you don't have any tools with you. Now, when you want to redeem yourself, you have to take that wall down. But guess what? You still don't have any tools. So it's possible, but it's a lot of work. You have to put in a lot of work, I think, to be able to be redeemed in that answer. Now, this is where I'd like to separate oath breaking from dishonesty, because oath breaking is maybe at the time you made the oath, you were 100% honest internally with yourself and the current set of knowledge that you had at the time. And then later on down the line, you found that you didn't have it. You were not able to make that oath. You made it anyway, so now you're being an oath breaker. And that's different than being dishonest in that particular instance, in the sense that if you made that oath with 100% intention of following through with that oath, and then something happened, or you came across an instance where you couldn't deal with it, you couldn't fulfill that oath, then it's going to be easier and to follow with the analogy of you building that brick wall, you can then enlist the help of an oath helper to help you fulfill that oath. And at which point, that's a tool that you can use to break that wall down.
I see.
When you're dishonest, you don't. If you were being dishonest when you made that oath, or whatever the other instances that you were being a liar in, there is no oath helper. There's nobody that's going to trust you to be that oath helper. So yes, I think you can redeem yourself, but that work is it's much harder to tear down that wall with your bare hands and no tools.
Understood. Do you have any advice that you might be able to give somebody who's on the path that may be struggling with this sort of situation? Specifically being dishonest?
Oof.
Has a reputation for being dishonest?
Stop. I don't know. I mean, if you have a reputation for being dishonest, then it's gonna take some work for you to be trustworthy, if at all, if you can be again. Yeah. I like to say maybe that, there's a bank account, there's a social bank account, and if you are being dishonest, or if you have a reputation of being dishonest, then you're overdrawn on that social bank account, and you need to make sizable deposits before you can be in the black again.
Yeah, it's hard because I think that, again, because this is so fundamental to everything else that we're trying to accomplish. When you cross this line, it's hard to then be redeemed, or to approach it in a way that you almost, in my experience, wouldn't expect that you'd ever be able to get 100% of the people back, because there's always going to be somebody who's going to doubt you.
And if you are honest after that point, and you've been redeemed in the majority, but there's still some people, expect it.
Yeah.
And continue to be honest with yourself and honest with everybody, that you have built this house and now you must live in it. So yeah.
I think that where this comes into play probably more often than not, from a fighter's perspective, is calibration. I think that dishonesty in calibration, for the sake of a specific tournament or a specific opponent, perhaps, because I've seen both, or believe I've witnessed both. I think that there's a lot of ego that motivates that kind of behavior.
Sure. Ego and fear. I think fear of losing, fear of being thought of as a loser, even though, well, I mean, you aren't just for losing a fight or two, or being less skillful than your opponents does not make you a loser. But I do feel that you're right. Ego and fear of the id,
Right.
that is a big motivator for being dishonest.
Yeah. And I think that where I would like to, I guess, give advice in that regard is uh, when you even begin to feel yourself try to compromise your integrity, you begin to talk to yourself in your head and decide it's okay to expect a harder shot from this person or that person, or in this situation or that situation. I think that you have got to really reflect on why you're allowing yourself to make that exception. I think that I think if you're going to make those exceptions in those moments, then what's to stop you from applying it to a situation where there might be some very dire consequences? I mean, lying about your calibration is not great, but it's probably not the end of the world either. But,
True.
There are other places where this can be of greater detriment to not just you but others.
Absolutely. But to go back on it, if you're a liar, you're a liar. And if you're lying about your calibration, then what else are you lying about? So, it's hard to create a level of trust when I've already, on this very visible layer, not I can't trust you here. So
yeah, I think there's a lot of forgiveness in our community, but I do think there are some folks that hang on to things for a while. There's some institutional memory there as well. I think, and that's not just in the Outlands. I think that's true across the SCA, probably for nonprofits, period. But I think that there's a time limit on some of this stuff, on mistakes in general. But I think that there's a special category when it comes to being dishonest, just for the reason that, or the reasons that we've been discussing, is that it becomes so pervasive in the behavior of the person that's perpetrating it. Once they make that, like you said, once they've decided that it's okay to lie about this, then I guess it's okay to lie about anything. And I think you and I have both experienced individuals that live those kind of lives.
Yeah.
So suffice to say, it's certainly a bigger problem than we're going to solve tonight.
Sure.
Let's see. What exactly, and I think this is kind of our last question on truth and dishonesty. And we kind of touched on it a little bit, but what do you think motivates dishonesty and oath breaking?
I think we did just answer.
Yeah, we just cover that. I might edit that out, or I might keep it. We don't. Who knows?
Fear. I think fear is the biggest thing.
Yeah.
What are you fearful of? I mean, that's unique to the situation and the subject. I think you said it good as well as ego. So maybe fear of id is the big motivator. So, yeah.
Can we? Is there a way to remove the fear, or is that something that somebody has to do on their own?
I think that's something that somebody has to do on their own, but that also will then lead into some of the other virtues like courage. Do you have the courage to deal with yourself? And that's, I think, a big motivator of that, is that if you have the fear and not the courage, then maybe that's where you stray.
Sure.
So,
all right, cool. Now for some more general and maybe some fun questions for you. Maybe we'll see. I don't know. I'm hoping it'll be like story time. But I asked these two of Sir Thomas last time, and I think I'm going to sort of let them pop up throughout other episodes because I think they're kind of interesting. But the
Sure.
first one says, if we were writing a book of knightly fables, uh, what story from your personal history would you contribute in order to teach a lesson to the later generations?
I would add, and I'm just going to read this because I think I wrote it better than I can say it.
Please
Uh,
do.
I would probably like to add the tale of the Honorable Lord Mordygan, a contending fighter in the spring 2005 Outlands Crown Tournament, wherein I had fought with a dishonorable fighter who neglected to take any of my blows, and when I was struck, I fell down dead. The fighter came to me after the fight and said that he felt that none of my or that he felt I had not landed any sufficient blows on him, which I feel the other way. But I was not. I swore an oath on that day that I would uh, allow my opponent to judge the blows that landed upon him, and that he felt the blow that I took was too light. To which I replied that I could not take his blow, as it was clean and fair, uh, and that there was nothing else for it. He walked away. I don't know what his feelings are, but I can say that his honor was less and mine stayed intact. So the lesson is honesty kept my honor and dishonesty lost his.
For sure. I that's an interesting, and I'm sure that other kingdoms have similar things in the oaths, the sword oath that they speak before crowd tournament. But uh, I do appreciate the wording in that oath that um, I will allow my opponent to judge the blows that are laid on them. I think that stating up front that that's the rules we're going to play by today
Mm-hmm.
really I think it puts an extra layer of pressure on anybody who might think it's okay to have some sort of varying calibration throughout the tournament. I
I would hope so.
I know
don't know the if that really is the situation, but I certainly hope so.
well, I'll say this: it works on me. You know, I, it certainly is not foolproof, but when you talk about maintaining your own honor, one of the ways you do that is by being trustworthy and upholding truth and keeping oaths, as we've discussed many times today. But
Yeah.
I think that I like that aspect of that oath because it's not it is not taken for granted that we all understand what we're there to do. But after you take that oath, if there's any question in your mind, you probably shouldn't fight.
Yeah.
And then it's not a mistake. It's not a oops, I forgot where I was at. It's a no, I swore that I was going to behave this way. So in my mind, it binds you, and the words have power, and that's why we inscribe them on our leg.
Indeed.
All right, very good one. Thank you for that one. And the second one is, if we were doing a direct history book about specifically the Knights of the Outlands, sort of maybe a white book of the chivalry sort of concept, as we've seen in popular fiction. What moment would you contribute as your proudest achievement or exploit?
I wouldn't say. Well, no. I'll say it this way, and then address it more specifically. The strength of my shield, I think, is maybe my more proudest parts about being in the SCA. The specific moments are hearing others talk about how my shield saved their lives at a foreign war and kept my kinsmen alive for longer than they expected to be, so that we could show the might that is the Outlands army, however small in number we show. And then the other one is keeping my spearmen alive and frustrating the spearmen across from me so much so that they left the line after a very audible grunt of frustration and found someplace else to go fight because they could not kill my spearmen. That was probably the most satisfying single moment in fighting as a knight in the SCA.
That's fantastic. I got to say, we've traveled a lot together, you and I, and yes, I would concur that the deeds and exploits of your shield work are known world famous, and I've picked up some things myself from you that have served me well on the shield wall. We've stood together where it was just me and you, and we were the Outland shield wall. You know, at a couple of different conflicts, but the truth is when we talk about dynamic shield presence, I think your picture's there in that book. You know, lots of great travels with you, my friend. We've had a lot of talks just like this in the car on the way to places, and I really do appreciate you giving me your time, answering some of these more specific inquiries into your philosophy on truth, oath keeping, dishonesty, the like. I would certainly also like to thank you for just being a solid counselor to me, always helping me make those tough decisions, and reminding me of what's important, and always being honest in your appraisal of the situation. That's been of great benefit to me as we have been friends.
And that is a two-way street. I appreciate the same from you.
Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, another session has gone by. I hope that you enjoyed our conversation tonight with Eorl Mordygan on the great virtuous topic of the truth. We will be back with another episode in a couple weeks with another guest. We'll be putting out media about that pretty soon. Kind of generate some hype. Don't forget, we do have other folks in our Outlands community putting out a lot of content. Sir Boheman is doing a lot with his shop night programs. He's got a quick video out there right now about how to make leather toggles. You should check that out. It's a very useful skill to acquire. We've also seen episodes of Outlands Royal Tea, spelled TEA, out there doing some great stuff, documenting the beautiful and varied history of the kings and queens of the Outlands. So please do us a favor and check out those things, along with all the other great interview shows and so on and so forth that's being produced by various people across the known world. I am never short of being amazed at how much we've been able to come together in this not so convenient or happy situation that we call the COVID-19 pandemic. There's a lot of great stuff to see and to experience, and I encourage you to get out there and maintain those connections with our SCA family. Thanks again for joining us. I hope to see you again next time. This is Sir Roland, once again for Chivalry Yo. Have a nice evening.
Chivalry Yo.
Chivalry Yo. All right.